you know, joining us at on a different day than what we had originally said. But we really wanted to kind of continue on this path that we got on with Tom. And so we are going to start with kind of the second installment of the planning process. And Tom has really been gracious enough to kind of customize some of the work that he's doing for the rest of Lincoln, and make it, I think, a lot more meaningful and a little smaller group, so it's a little easier for you to probably follow along, and also an opportunity for you to ask any questions of Tom, you know, while we're together today. So please feel free and make good use of the time that you have today with Tom, and ask questions and kind of get a really good feel for how, you know, he is managing the process with the advisors that he's working with, and hopefully we'll get a lot out of it today. A few announcements before we get moving. First of all, there was an email that Shane just put out as a fraud alert, and I'd encourage everyone to take a hard look at that, and also to make sure that your staff knows about it. This is becoming more and more, it kind of seems like it comes in waves. You know, we end up with times where we just get more and more, we get hit often, and then it kind of stops. Well, we're in a period right now where we're getting a lot of fraud emails. And so really, especially if it's coming from a third party, any third party, just look at them very carefully. But check out Shane's email today for this very specific threat, and then keep an eye on both our weekly newsletter that comes out on Monday, and also Advisor Week on Friday from Lincoln, because in both of those communications, you'll often see things from you know, regarding things like, you know, email threats and all the challenges we have with keeping data. Hey, and if everybody please be sure and mute your phones, if you would. We got a little bit of background noise here, and but unless you're asking a question or talking to us, please mute your phones. We have a call tomorrow. Angie and Joanne and I have a call tomorrow with Schwab. All right. Now we've got some real racket. I don't know what that is, but again, there we go. It's gone. And so we are moving forward on the Schwab. It's taking time, and it's going to take more time. It's a complicated matter, but we've and also a lot of the Schwab people have been on vacation that we needed to have in the conversations as well. So we've got everyone back at their desks, and we are going to try to move forward tomorrow. I had a very good conversation with Joanne about kind of the whole Schwab relationship, and I think we've narrowed the questions down to the ones that make the most sense. I then have a call next week with the advisory committee that we put together with Ryan Weber, John Ginty, and Ryan Day, and Jeremy, and Brian Hovenstock. And at that time, I'm going to share, you know, some of the feedback and notes and things from our Schwab call, get some feedback from them on some of the things that we've asked them to look at. And then hopefully after that, I should be able to have a little bit better direction for the whole group and some updates that we can share. But we're actively working on that. And I have also been actively working with Dennis Hauser on some other tools and that we might be able to get in your hands that would be through our Pershing relationship as well. So we're looking at a variety of things right now that we're hoping we can make available to you that will just add some efficiencies to your business and help you grow in a more profitable manner. The only other thing I really had today well, first of all, before I do this, because this is going to kind of lead me into introducing Tom, is there anyone on the phone that has any issues or questions or things that they'd like to bring up while we've got you all here? Got some cool music. Hello. There we go.
Good morning, Ray.
All right. What's that?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm doing well, thank you. Could I call you back in about 50 minutes? Okay, that'd be great.
All right. If you could.
I appreciate that very much. I'm on a conference call, and I'll be done in just about an hour.
Whoever this is, if you could please mute your phone, I appreciate it. All right. Anyway, I'm going to move forward. So anyway, what I'm going to ask everyone to do is, we've been talking about this all year. Please look at your accounts and make sure that you're doing the proper rebalancing and de-risking and things that really you need to be doing, especially with the markets in the position that they're in. You know, we continue to see a little bit more volatility. We continue to see, though, the markets, you know, going up. So we know that when that happens, it knocks a lot of these accounts out of their proper allocation and balance. The other thing I would encourage you to do is remember, especially those of you that are managing money yourself, the SEC is going to continue to be asking for reports on, you know, how often are you trading on those accounts? Are you doing the proper rebalancing? What kind of cash balances are you carrying in those accounts? And I know we went through a lot of this last year, and I think it was pretty disruptive for some of you. Hopefully, because of that experience, it's not going to be near as big a deal this year. But I would expect that we're going to hear those same things from compliance again this year. And so please be taking the opportunity when you're having your annual reviews with clients to do some rebalancing. That will get you in line with the SEC requirements. And then also take a hard look at your cash balances if you're charging fees against them, and make sure that you've got appropriate cash positions. And if not, then you may need to pull some of that money out or exclude it from the fee if it's, you know, if you get too high on those balances. And again, I think this whole planning process that Tom talks about really helps to mitigate some of these issues of rebalancing and keeping clients within their risk tolerances and you know, in proper allocation. So anyway, with that, I'm going to ask Tom to take over from here and start his presentation. And again, throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, just either shoot a note in or unmute your phone and ask a question, and we'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So, Tom, if you're there, let's let you get going.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. Thanks for having me, folks. Nice to be with you again. Hope you're all doing well and had a great 4th of July. I am excited to be here, and you know, I think, John, that was a perfect lead-in, because what you said was, you know, the whole idea of financial planning and the process being able to help you deal with regulatory and questions of suitability, et cetera. I think it's a very valid comment, because ultimately what I know is that financial planning is an ongoing process. And that's a big part of what I try to teach, is that, you know, some people view financial planning as a one-time event. And what I would argue is that it is not, especially in this day and age with the way that you can incorporate technology in, you know, helping the client to collaborate more effectively with you to make better, consistent, ongoing decisions. It makes it a far more interactive and dynamic process. And I would argue it is an ongoing process. It is not a one-time event. Initially, I also think it gives you the ability to, the way I think about it is if I went to a doctor today and I hurt my knee and the doctor said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "My knee hurt." And he said, "Okay, here's some pain medicine." And he did zero diagnostic work. I would be terrified and I would run for the hills and I'd find a new doctor. And so, whether it's an MRI or an ultrasound or an X-ray, the reality is the doctor has different tools that he can use based on the type of ailment to try to get a handle on what's happening so he can prescribe the right course of treatment. And to me, that's what financial planning is. It's in the front end of a relationship. It's the diagnostic tool by which I can get to know you well enough that I can make educated recommendations that are holistic in nature. Because I don't want to treat symptoms, right? I want to get to the root issues, and I want to make sure that we're addressing the root issues. So that being said, I think, John, that was a perfect segue in. And what we did in the first session for last month's call is we sort of set the framework for how to think about planning as a model. I gave you some mindset and thought process around it. What I want to do now, and what we'll do through the remainder of the summer, is we will try to bring it alive for you in the context of a sales process, right? How do you make planning a part of your model and at each step? So, I've got some slides I'll share with you. This one just shows, again, this is, if you were on the last call, you saw this, but this is where the planning process and the sales process really come together. They're very closely aligned. In fact, you'll notice at the first step in the planning process, you're clarifying and quantifying goals and objectives, and you do that in the context of a consultation. I call it the life goal priority meeting. We'll talk about that today. That's really what today's about. Today's about, if you are interested in making planning a bigger part of your model, it starts with how you brand yourself, and it starts in the lead generation process, right? The consultation that you have with prospects doesn't start with the consultation. The consultation starts not when you are in the conference room and face-to-face across from the prospect. It starts when you how you brand yourself in the community, the context by which you generate that lead, how they perceive you at the time you first are introduced to them or meet them. And so, today what I'll talk about is how you're branding yourself at the front end of the process. Are you weaving financial planning into the ways that you talk to clients? And then I'll get into the consultation. The next session we'll really focus around, effective data gatherings using financial planning tools, some best practices around an effective fact finder, and then we'll get into implementation and client service and how you weave financial planning through your entire process. So along the way, if you got questions, jump in. It can be interactive. In fact, I'd appreciate it. If you have questions, thoughts, comments, let me know. But I'll dive in, and this is really, again, my process. So just for those of you that may not know this, I have 7 advisors at the home office. I manage over 22,000 client relationships, orphaned accounts across the United States. Just to give you some perspective, I just finished the mid-year. I'm sitting, as we speak, my branches, and I have several, ISA branches at the home office. I'm at 1.379, 1,379,000 GDC at the mid-year, and my branches are, we have about $585 million in assets under management. So I just want to give you that context to let you know that I'm not running a small business. I've got a pretty large operation, and this is the process we follow, right? We generate the prospect. We make 7 attempts to contact the prospect. We want to get them into an initial consultation where they either engage with us or they don't, and I map out to my people what happens if they don't. We set them on a follow-up schedule. We drip, right? No doesn't mean never. It means not now, because financial planning is really behavioral in nature. And just like telling somebody that they should quit smoking and they say no doesn't mean they're opposed to the idea. It just means right now they're not quitting smoking, right? So it's the same kind of thing. I don't take no as never unless they say that. If they say yes, then there's my process. We engage with them. We do a fact finder, the second meeting, using eMoney or Money Guide Pro on my team. We then do the analysis and the strategy work We call them ahead of time. We tell them what's coming, so there's no surprises, and with the goal being that they implement their financial plan. So I'm going to share a lot about my process. If you're doing it, and I know like Jeremy and some others that are on this call, they're already doing planning. My hope is you take a best practice or two from me today and something that you can implement. So with that, the only other thing I'd add is, I think urgency is a really difficult thing for advisors to generate, especially in people that have money, right? It's hard to get a wealthy client to do the things you want them to do on your timeline. In fact, I'd argue it's one of the hardest things you have to do, because you can't really scare a wealthy client into action, right? They're not eating ramen noodles tomorrow, no matter what you tell them, and they know it. So how you get people to engage in urgency is a challenge in some cases. I will tell you, I drive it at the process level. From the first consultation to the day we present advice, I set the clock moving, and I challenge my advisors. I want advice in the client's hands in 18 days or less. I read a study that was done by Ameriprise when I was there that suggested the implementation rate for your client's implementation drops off a cliff after 18 days. And in fact, the faster you get advice in their hands, the more excited they are, the more engaged they are, and the more apt they are to take advantage of and implement the advice. So this whole process you see, I try to deliver it to the client in 18 days or less. It's never perfect, but that's what we're shooting for. So let's get into some thoughts about some best practices around financial planning. And my first question is, what's your message? How are you branding yourself? You all have a brand, whether you realize it or not. Most people realize it. Some people don't, believe it or not. But you are no different than Apple or any other large company. You have a brand, and by brand, I mean there is a connotation. When you meet somebody in the community, they're going to have an impression. If they see your marketing materials, they go to your websites, they go to your LinkedIn, those all contribute or detract from your message. So my challenge to you is, just like Hershey or Coca-Cola or any other firm, are you being deliberate in crafting your message, or is it being crafted for you? And furthermore, if in fact financial planning is something that you want to really focus on, how does the concept of financial planning, how does that fit into your message, right? And is all your messaging aligned? Here's what I mean by that. This is not a political statement. It is applicable, but I'll use it as an example. So, and then I think it applies no matter who you are. I'm on Facebook. I lived in 7 states in the last 12 years for my career. I have friends all over the United States. I use Facebook to keep in touch with them. I have a friend who's an attorney who literally 5 times a day is blasting me with anti-Trump stuff now. And before him, I had other people who blasted me constantly in the last administration with anti-Obama stuff. And they're on the far, you probably have them too, they're on the far ends of the spectrum, right? Here's the thing, this attorney wants me to be his client. And I will never be his client. Because I have a feeling if I became his client, every single one of my meetings would be about his political beliefs. Now, that may not be fair, but whether he realizes it or not, and I'd argue not, he is polarized his entire network to those that agree with him and those that don't. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm not even saying you shouldn't do it. What I am saying is you should be aware of it. And if you choose to do it, it should be because you're comfortable with the consequences of a totally polarized natural market. Because what it means to this guy is he can never have me as a client. I'll never be his client. He's eliminated the possibility of me ever retaining him as an attorney. Because on top of what I think would happen is every meeting I have with him, somehow political comments would work their way into our meeting. I would get the privilege of paying for that in billable hours. So I say that to you to say, now, if he decided at some point that his political views are part of his brand, more power to him. I'm suggesting to you he didn't. That's all I'm saying. Because you think about what you message people, you should really be cognizant of how the messages that you are putting out there align with your overall objective. And for the context of our conversation today, part of the message should be that you do financial planning and you help people in a comprehensive way consistently make decisions that are in alignment with their long-term and short-term goals, right? At the core, that's what planning is. It's helping people make consistently good decisions that are in alignment with their long-term and short-term goals. And so if you're not really good at this, and you know, the way you would check it is you would look at, you know, let's just assume I'm a prospect. I get referred to you. Somebody I know tells me you're great. So I look you up online, and you have to be aware that that's happening. So I go to your LinkedIn and I try to find you on Facebook if you're not private, and I might look you up on Twitter, and I'm going to get an impression of you. And it's either going to be favorable or it's not. It's either going to improve my original opinion of you, or it's going to detract from my original opinion of you. So my comment to you today is to simply be cognizant about your messaging. Incorporate planning into your message. I call it the big rocks. If you're not really good at this, or you don't put a lot of energy into it, let me give you a great way to think about it. I call it the big rocks. So for me, the big rocks are family, community, excellence, and integrity. They're the things that matter most to me. They're my core values and principles. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to align most of what my messages are to those big rocks. And so regardless of how you interact with me, those are the things I'm trying to convey, whether it's in person, whether it's through my LinkedIn postings, whether it's through my Twitter. I will tell you my Facebook is private. I go to Facebook to get away from work, and I use it to keep in touch with my friends from all over the country. But nonetheless, I wanted to start with that because if your goal is to incorporate planning to a larger degree, planning should be a part of your branding, and it should be a deliberate, conscious message. From there, the second question I would have for you is, what do you say you do when people ask you? Do you tell them you're a planner and talk about, you know, decision making and goal setting and clarity, or do you talk about asset management, or do you talk about products? And there's no right answer, by the way. It's a choice you make relative to your business model. But if your goal is that financial planning is a larger part of what you do, then I think it has to be part of how you describe your services when you're asked what you do for a living. So here's some tips. I call it the elevator pitch, but really what it is I talk about myself the same way in almost every setting. If I'm asked, I can expand my pitch. It can be 30 seconds. Like if I have to stand up at a chamber of commerce and I got 30 seconds to introduce myself, it's the same basic framework as if I had an hour to talk about myself, and I can expand on each topic. So I'll just tell you very quickly, I'll do the 30-second view for you. Today, my name's Tom Lakatos. I'm a financial advisor at Lincoln Investment. I think it's really important that if you want to understand what I do, first you got to understand what I don't do. I'm not a stockbroker. It's not about buying and selling securities all day. I have clients who trade and I support those activities, but it's not my primary function. Second, I'm not a market economist. I don't know if the Dow's going up or down. I have market economists around me, though, who have very strong opinions, and I'm very educated about where I think directionally the market's going. But that said, I serve three primary functions. One, I help my clients clarify and quantify their financial goals and objectives. Fact is, most people can't financially articulate what they're working towards, makes them less likely to be successful, fundamentally. Second, I help people make good, consistent, non-emotional financial decisions. Fact is, money's emotional, and that emotion leads to bad decision-making often. And third, I coach people in every element of their life financially. I have found that decisions you might make in one element of your life financially often have ripple effects in others. I help my clients think about every element of their life financially and make consistently good decisions across the spectrum of their life. Those are my three primary purposes. Now, what I would tell you is if I had an hour to speak, I could go for 20 minutes on the importance of financial goal setting. There's been so much work done on what happened, like, right? If you can articulate your goal, you're like 42% more likely to achieve it than somebody who can't. If you write it down, you're 40% more likely. And if you share it with somebody else, you're 120% more likely on top of that. The total's like 200% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down and tell somebody about them. Well, what is a financial plan at its core? It's written goals shared with a professional that's helping hold you accountable to doing it. You're increasing the likelihood it happens by 200%, statistically speaking. That's a great example. And I can go off for 20 minutes or more just on that topic. I could certainly go longer on, the importance of non-emotional decision making, right? The fundamental differences in the way we buy investments versus retail. We like buying suits at a discount. We hate buying investments at a discount. We love our 401k full price. We hate buying purses full price, as an example. The fundamental disconnect that exists between how we are a consumer at the retail level for stuff and investment matters. Third, the idea of coaching people. When I'm talking about where I coach people, I'm really speaking about the 6 key areas of financial planning, right? Current situation, risk mitigation questions, wealth accumulation goals, tax planning, retirement planning, and estate planning. Right? I coach in all of it. So my point is, I don't know what you say. I just wanted to make you aware that at the end of the day, be specific about what you do. And then the other point I would make is really, and I've coached some advisors on this. One is specifically in WMP that has, been working with me specifically to get better at implementation. And what I find is he has been positioning himself for years as a resource for the client, and not as somebody that can help with implementation. And not surprisingly, clients don't implement with him at the level that he thinks is warranted. And so, the work I'm doing with him is starting at the very basic level. How are you positioning yourself? Right? I'm not here to educate you. Don't get me wrong. I want you to be as educated as you want to be, but at the end of the day, I'm really here to help you take action. Like, I believe if I knew physically how to get from here to San Francisco, I'm in fact no closer to San Francisco. I have to start moving towards San Francisco to get closer to San Francisco, right? And so a lot of it is, if you struggle a little bit with clients taking your advice and going and implementing it with you, I would have you start all the way back at the beginning. And how are you presenting your role in their equation? Are you there just to make sure that they've got the information they need so they can make the great decision? Or are you setting it up from the very beginning that my goal is you take action on these goals and I'm going to help you do that, right? All right, so let me give you just some context, because like I said, I believe the financial planning process starts there, right? It starts with how I'm positioning myself in the community. It starts with how I talk about it at the lead level. And then it goes further into how you're setting the appointment. What's the context for the meeting, right? For example, if the context for the meeting is I want to review your portfolio, and then I bring you in and I do this big long bait and switch where I talk about insurance, that might turn you off. I set the meeting under one context and I executed it at another, right? That could frustrate some clients and lead to you not acquiring the clients. So if financial planning is at the core of what you want to do, let me give you some ideas. So if you're a new prospect, here's the context my guys are trying to set the appointment under. I'd love to sit down with you for an hour because I'm not sure if you should have a financial advisor, and if so, should it be me? In other words, do you want my help and do you need my help? Right? And those are two very different statements, right? That's not the same as, I like the first one better for what it's worth. That's what I'm after. I'd like you to meet with me for an hour. I want to learn a little bit about you. I want to tell you a little bit about what I do. And our goal is simple. Should you have an advisor? And if so, should it be me? The second is for those of you with maybe junior advisors under you that are calling into your book, the lower end of your book, or maybe you're a junior advisor calling into a senior advisor's book, or maybe you've been at this a while, you know that your book kind of got away from you for a little bit, and you're getting back in the game and you're calling clients that maybe you haven't talked to in a while. So they're existing client, then you haven't talked to them in a while. Here's the context. Mr. Client, I'd like to schedule a review meeting with you. And I want to review your account, and that's really important to me. But what's more important to me is that I could tell you how the account's doing, but I can't tell you how it's doing for you. So I'd really like us to have a conversation about you. I want to learn a little bit about your life and your goals and your priorities, because I think it's important that I understand how the investments that you have fit with your life. And those of you that have been in training with me before, I ask this question a lot. If I sold you an investment that guaranteed you 8% a year for the next 30 years of your life, is that good? And invariably I get yes, that'd be really good. And I would tell you not if you need 11. 8's bad if you need 11. You'd run out of money. You'd be 3% short. You'd run out of money. So it's contextual. It's not about what you can get the client. And frankly, it's never been about what you can get the client. It's about what the client needs to get what they want out of their money. and aligning the investment strategy to get them what they want in their life. Every nickel that client has served some purpose, right? Somebody's going to spend it at some point on something. And if it isn't going to be them, it's going to be their kids. But somebody's going to spend it. My goal is to figure out who, and is the money positioned to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish with it. So that's what that's about. I could tell you how the account's doing, but I can't tell you how it's doing for you. So I know we haven't talked in a while. I'd like to get caught up on your life first so I can address that. Maybe you're an existing client and this idea of moving to financial planning is a shift in your services. You've really had maybe an asset management focus, or some of you at WMP, you were heavy capitist guys selling it, and maybe you still are, where you're selling a ton of insurance, leading with insurance. And so the idea of a more holistic dialogue is something new. It'd be sort of a change of services in essence. So what I would say, here's the context for that, right? I think that's a pretty easy, Mr. Klein, I'd like to have a conversation with you. I'm always looking for ways to have more of an impact with my clients. And I'd like to share with you how my approach is shifting. I think you'll love it. And you're basically looking for permission to tell them how you're growing from the product focus to the consultative one-on-one coaching approach. And then I'll skip the last one, but that is, if you were in the 403B space, I would get into that, which you're not. So hopefully that helps you a little bit. If those are the contexts by which I'm trying to get you to sit down with me for the consultation, because in all of those, I've now got your permission. In essence, if you set a meeting with me under those contexts, I now have permission to have a deeper, holistic conversation that centers around financial planning and your life and how the two might intersect. All right. I won't do much here on this stuff because I know we've got about 25 minutes. I'll just touch on it. Right. It's same thing goes when you generate the lead and you want them to take your call. Right. What's the context when you're talking to those leads? Is the context I just want to review your account? Is I want to give you opinion on your investment strategy? Or is the context to find out how you can help them with their financial life, right? And I understand it varies by lead source, but back to my original question, is your approach aligned with your message, and is it aligned with planning as a model, if in fact that's the direction you want to go? I'll just hit this at a high level. You saw earlier in my system, we have a 7-touch call system to appointment setting. I won't spend a lot of time on this. What I will say is, Inside Sales did a study. They studied 15,000 leads over 3 years. It was over 100,000 call attempts. And they found out that the average prospect requires 6 touches before they respond to a salesperson. And they found that the salesperson tries 2 or 3 times on average. Think about that disconnect. So the average prospect requires 6 attempts. The average salesperson tries twice. Most leads are never reached, then, is the conclusion. So I have a process that I can share with you if you're interested at another time. But if you generated a lead today in my practice, we would try you 7 times over the next 2 weeks. 3 calls every other day, a mailing of some sort, email preferably, followed by 3 more attempts in the second week every other day. 7 contact attempts over 2 weeks. At which point at the end we say, hey, we've tried multiple times over 2 weeks. Doesn't appear to be the right time for you to engage in this conversation. We'll try you back every month to see if the timing might be better. Okay, so wanted to share that. I'll skip the best practices. Most of you have been in business for a while, so I'll assume you're no stranger to making phone calls. Let's assume then you get the appointment. What I want to hit on then is really what's the components in my model of the consultation. I call it the life goal priority meeting, right? That's really, I think it says exactly what I'm trying to accomplish in that meeting. I'm trying to learn about your life, your goals, and your priorities rather than just saying I'd like to invite you to the office for initial consultation, right? That's kind of clinical. It's kind of distant. I think advisors it's an overused phrase for sales. I think clients see it as a transparent attempt to sell me something. I think when I say to the client, we'd like to schedule for what we call the life goal priority meeting, where we want you to come to the office or jump online, and we want to have a conversation about your life. And the goal is, I'm not sure if you should have a financial advisor, and I'm not sure if that advisor should be me. But by sharing information about your life, goals, and priorities, I can address by the end of that hour, I'll be able to address those two questions, right? That's the context that we're trying to get people into. I would tell you there's only a few goals, right? My desired outcome, I'm a big believer. I don't do anything without thinking beforehand, what am I trying to accomplish? If you've ever been to a wedding or a holiday party where somebody cornered you and was trying to sell you something, you know that they have no concept of what I just said, right? I'm not trying to sell you anything at a wedding, right? I'm not trying to sell you anything at the holiday party, right? What I'm trying to do is go create a little relationship with somebody and shake your hand at the end of the wedding and say, hey man, this was a really great wedding. I'm really glad I met you. You know, there's a time and a place to talk business. This wasn't it, but man, you're really cool. I would love to have a conversation with you about whether you should have a financial advisor and whether it should be me. Can I call you on Monday? Right? So what I want out of this, I'm a big believer. What in advance am I trying to accomplish? I want a new client out of the consultation. I want to have a basic understanding of their life. I want to demonstrate active listening. That's very, that is very important to me, right? This is a sort of a scale question for most of you, right? You've been at this a while. Does your consultation follow the same basic framework, or do you do it differently every time you're in a room with somebody? I will tell you this, if you do it differently every time you're in the room with somebody, you are listening to respond when a client talks to you. You are not listening to listen. You are listening to respond. That's not active listening. To me, that's the power of having a framework that's repeatable. I can build muscle memory, and if I'm not thinking about what to say next because my meetings follow the same process every time, I can actually listen. And if you can listen, clients will feel more connected to you, of course, and that's one of the ways we demonstrate competency, right? In an hour, I'm trying to get you to like me enough and trust me enough that you do business with me. And one of the surefire ways to not do that is don't listen to the client. So I want to demonstrate active listening. I want permission at the end of the conversation, at the end of the hour, to broaden the conversation if it's applicable. And I want to accomplish step one in the process. Remember, financial planning process, step one, clarify and quantify your goals and objectives. That's what I'm trying to do in this consultation, all right? So I'll get into what that looks like. Here's my agenda for consultation. And by the way, I'll make sure, Steph and Angie get these slides and my scripting so you can have it, make it yours. I'm just hopefully sharing some stuff that, maybe you take a best practice or two. If you're wholesale looking to change, I'll give you the exact framework. You don't have to invent anything. Here's my agenda. The goals for the meeting, very, very simple. Should you have an advisor and should it be me? Brief introductions. I talk for 2 minutes about me. Again, it aligns with my big rocks, right? Family, community, excellence, and integrity. I don't just say I'm a financial advisor, CFP. I say I'm a dad and I'm a husband first. My kids are 14 and 10. I've been with my wife, Eden, for 25 years. We've been married. It'll be 18 over Thanksgiving. Love of my life. I'm an active participant in my community. I volunteer. I'm on boards. I get involved. I'm not the type to sit by and hope others can make my community a better place. We get involved in my family. But what you really should know is I'm a student of a very serious business. I understand if I'm going to help my clients, how important their money is to them. And you should know that I take it very seriously. I pay attention. I'm educated. I read. I leverage resources. I don't know it all. I'll never know it all. It's a constant evolution. But I promise you, I work really hard and I take it really seriously. Don't take my word for it. Hopefully I show you. Right? I say almost that exact same thing every single time because those are the things that align with my big rocks: family, community, excellence, and integrity. And then I talk just for a minute or two about my company. Right? I don't know what you say about WMP. I don't know what you say about Lincoln. You should probably say a few things. I always say the company will never land you the client, but it'll cost you one at some point if the client lacks confidence. Here's a few things about us if you don't know about Lincoln that you could share with clients. According to the Investment News, we're the number 21 largest independent broker dealer. In the last 8 years, we are out of the top 50 broker dealers. We're number 2 in terms of the percentage growth since 2010. We're number 2 in the industry in percentage of female advisors. We're number 4 in the industry in employee to advisor ratio. We're number 9 in the business in percentage of fee-based revenue. And 9 years in a row, Lincoln Investment has been a best workplace in Philadelphia in the mid-sized space at the corporate office. People want to work here, and once they're here, they want to stay. And it's 9 years in a row. It's not an accident. We do a pretty good job of taking care of our employees. Those are the kinds of things I like to tell clients because I want them to know this isn't, Bob's firm operating out of a basement somewhere, right? So I don't know what you say, but you want to say something, I think, about WMP, about your firm, and about the broker-dealer. Once we do that, I shift gears. And by the way, that's only a couple minutes, 2 minutes on me, a couple minutes on the company. And I always stop and say, is there anything you'd like to know about me or the company that I haven't addressed? You're doing a good job with it when they say no. No, you did a good job. I got a feel for you and the company. Thanks. But if you find that people are asking the same questions, you might want to, start incorporating that in how you talk about it. From there, I then shift gears and I say, great, for the next part of our meeting, as I said, my goal today was really to learn about your life, your goals and priorities, and then try to figure out if I might be able to help you given those. So why don't we start with you, which is really important because I want to, a lot of clients, the way to break down some defense is to get them to speak, right? Because, there's inherent tension. Think about like, for example, I deal with this a lot where we meet a teacher in a school system or something and they get excited about the advisor and then they go home and they tell their spouse, hey, honey, I set a meeting. We're going to go talk to a financial advisor that I met today and the other guy or gal manages the money and the household expenses. And what's the inherent connotation? Why would we need to meet with a financial advisor? What am I doing wrong? I'm not doing a good job? So, right, so there's some fundamental interpersonal dynamics. I just want to get you to break down the defense a little, and best way I know to do it is to get you to talk. So, and by the way, it's exactly what I say. Why don't we start by telling me about your life? Talk to me about your wife. Talk to me about your family. Talk to me about your kids. Talk to me about your home. Talk to me about your job. Those are the things I start with: family, job, and community. And I actively take an interest. I'm not just checking boxes. I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings with advisors where the client says, I have a kid, and the advisor doesn't even ask their name, how old they are, what school do they go to. They just move on like they're, where it's clear that the meeting is just about your money, right? Or they say, like I just mentioned, I've been with my wife, 25 years. This year will be our 18th wedding anniversary, right? You might say, how'd you meet her? Right? How did you know you'd marry her? Like, there are things you could ask that show that you care about the answer that'll develop relationship, right? So you want to do some of that. Goals and priorities, I help people think in terms of short term, like, what are the things financially you want to accomplish by the end of this year? Anything you'd like to accomplish, sometime in the next 3 years. Things you'd like to accomplish longer term, right? I want to get you to think short term because, guys and gals, here's what I know. Short-term goal achievement is the motivator to action, not long-term, right? If I know I've got 19 years till retirement, I'm going to give myself some mulligans. There's a lot of mulligan days where I could take a day off in the next 19 years. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter that much towards that long-term goal potentially. However, if I got something I need to accomplish in the next 12 months, every day counts. And so my ability to connect to your short-term goal becomes the motivator for you to take action today. And again, that's what I want. I want you to take action today and give me permission to help you, right? So, and then once we do that, great. Now that I've got some sense of your goals, I go through a little bit around what some of the priorities are. Then if I can only work on one of those for you first, which one would you have me start with? Why? Let's assume I could do that. What would be the second one? So I want to have some conversation around what things are most important to you and in what order. And from there, once I say, do you feel like based on our conversation, I got a pretty good sense of your life and your goals and your priorities? Is there anything we've missed? If they say no, I go, great. Well, then the second part of this meeting is going to be, I want to share with you a little bit about what I do. because, remember the goal was, do you need an advisor and should it be me? And so, part of it is you understanding what I do, and I'm going to get into that. All right. So I always start with the financial planning process. Here's what it is. It's not rocket science. It's not original, by the way. This is the same process advocated by the CFP board. It's the same process the FPA advocates for, right? So it's clarify, quantify goals and objectives. That's step one. Step two is gather information about your current situation. Step three is conduct an analysis of those two things. So here's where you are. Here's where you want to be. Here's what I think you should do. That's step four, make recommendations. Step five is take action and implement. I'm very upfront that that's part of my goal. My goal is to get you, if all this makes sense and you feel comfortable, my goal is to help you implement the solutions that will lead to a greater likelihood of success. Just telling you how to retire doesn't in fact help you retire at all. You have to do the things, right? And then I'll set you up on a proactive service approach whereby we can get to know you and we could stay ahead of both micro and macro changes in your life and in the economy, right? And then I will tell you, here's a sort of a best practice. For those of you vets on the line, you know this. There's one universal characteristic of great clients, one universal characteristic, and that is their forward thinking. So here's a great opportunity at the end of your process discussion to find out if they can see it a little bit, if they're forward thinking. I always ask, tell me a little bit, how do you think a process like this might help you? If you give me a decent answer to that question, I know you can see it a little bit. And if you can see it a little bit, there's a good chance we can work together. Because if you can't see it, if you're not forward thinking, right, you all know that if you tried to get somebody who can't see today to see tomorrow, good luck with that. You're going to bang your head against the wall at every step. They're just not going to participate. They don't really think that way. So I'm trying to figure out early in my process if you can start to see it. That's a great question. How do you think a process like this could help you? From there, I get in and I say, okay, great. Now that you got my process, I think it's important you understand philosophically how I approach financial money management. And I believe in a concept of financial balance. I'm not cute. I don't have a fancy name for it. I simply believe you should have the right amount of cash reserve, the right protection vehicles, some fixed assets, and some equity assets working together so that you can deal with adversity and opportunity without blowing up the long-term financial plan. And you've got something anchoring a portfolio, providing a steady anchor both in good times and bad, and you've got a hedge against inflation. And if I can get the right amounts of money working in those four areas, over time, I can project growth. And if I can project growth, you can make plans. That's really all I'm trying to accomplish. It's not rocket science. Every client I've told that to over the years goes, that makes perfect sense. It's so logical. And I go, great. The only thing then I need to do is I need some snapshot of where you stand relative to that concept of balance. So I've got this PowerPoint. And again, I'll send you the PowerPoint that I use. It's pre-approved by compliance. We use it on my team here at the home office. But when you do it in this context, like some people have said, how do you get their whole situation? How do you get them to tell you stuff about their money at the first meeting? This is how. It's the next logical question. We've talked about the process. We've talked about the philosophy I'm trying to implement. I just want a ballpark idea of where you stand against the philosophy. So I asked them, you know, what you see here is basically the conclusion of what I did in a role play. But, you know, Mr. Client, if you had an emergency or an opportunity, so imagine this is blank and cash reserve, protection, fixed asset, and equity assets are the only things you see, income and debt. And I'm filling in 10,000, 1.5 to 2 months in the cash reserve bucket because I asked that question. If there was an emergency tomorrow and you needed to access liquid cash, how much roughly, I don't need the exact number, but ballpark, how much ballpark could you get your hands on without selling anything? 10 grand. So I write it in, I type it in the box. And then I say, okay, and if you had no money coming in at all, how long does 10 grand last living the way you live today? You know, this guy said 1.5 to 2 months. So I now know with 2 questions, you're spending somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000-ish a month. And that you might not have a really good handle on it. You got me in the ballpark. right? And I now know, then I go through all your insurances, and all I ask is, do you have it? If so, how much? What kind? What do you pay? What do you know about it? Do you have health insurance? Do you have life? Do you have DI? And if they don't have it, I leave it there, but I put the X because I want you to see you don't have it. Do you have DI? Do you have long-term care? Do you have a liability policy or an umbrella? Are your auto and home bundled? This guy told me he had Aflac. So I asked 2 questions at the end of that. I'm not passing any judgment. I'm not trying to sell you insurance. At the end of that, I asked 2 questions. One, do you financially hold the bag for any family members? Meaning, do you have a sibling with special needs that you may have to take care of someday? Do you think you may have to pay for your parents later in life if they get sick? If you hold the bag, every family's got somebody in it that holds the bag financially. If it's you, we have planning things that we can talk to you about. Like, I think I've told somebody this story. I bought long-term care of my mom. I was 30 years old. My mom was 51 because a financial advisor asked me if I thought I might have to pay for her someday. And I said, I do. I think I have to. I already think I'm going to have to do that. My parents, I'm the first one that went to college. My parents sacrificed a lot for me. And there's no way I would not help my mother. And he goes, well, how old was your mom when she had you? And I said, 21. He goes, wait a minute. You mean when you're 62 years old, your mom's 83, that's the average age of nursing home. You're telling me you might have to pay for your mother's nursing care at 83 when you're 62, right before you retire? Holy cow, Tom, that's a huge gap. That's a bigger gap potentially than your kid's college education right before you retire. Did you know that? And I went, I have no idea. He goes, it's a simple question. Do you want to pay a little or a lot? And we bought long-term care then. I paid for it. My mom was the insured. So there are things you could do. If you have, a sibling that's younger than you with special needs, right? You could sell a second to die life insurance policy that pays on the death of your second parent and funds a special needs trust. So upon the death of your parents, you could assume responsibility for your sibling with special needs, but you don't have to pay for it. They provide the funding. So if you find out that they hold the bag, there's a lot of opportunity. The second question I asked there is, are you or your wife the insurance agent collecting the commission on any of these policies? And they go, why? And I say, well, because in my experience, if I could save you money or optimize your insurance situation, the only way you won't let me do it is if your spouse gets the commission. Right? So does she get the commission, or can I look at your insurances for you? Because I see some opportunity. Right? So I can get your whole situation on a piece of paper pretty fast. We do it via PowerPoint, but I've done this on bar napkins, face-to-face with a client, over a cocktail. I've done it in a conference room on a whiteboard. There are lots of ways to make this work, but it's a quick, easy way. And when you do it in the framework of them first, then the process, then the philosophy, then the question about their finances, it's just the next logical question. I've never had anybody say, I'm not telling you that info if you do it in that order. From there, and I don't solve it yet. I'm not telling them what to do. From there, I say, great. The only other thing is I want you to know the areas that I cover. Current situation, protection, investment planning, tax, retirement, estate. I touch on each of those. And then I say, okay, remember the first step was to clarify and quantify your goals and objectives. We've done a lot of that today. But now I want to relate your goals to the 6 key areas of planning. These are the areas I look at. Let's talk about what you would have me focus on first. If I could only work in one of these areas, where would you have me start? And I'm really now trying to clarify what's most important to them and how it relates to the 6 areas of planning. And again, I've got all the scripting. So that's a high-level overview. Then when it comes time all the way at the end for me to close it out, I go all the way back to the very beginning. If you think back to the beginning of this conversation, our goal today was, should you have an advisor and should it be me? I'm happy to say, based on our conversation today, I think you should have an advisor. And here's why. I see some real strengths in your situation, right? You make $200,000 a year. You have $150,000 in equity on your house. You're way ahead of the game on the investing side. You've got, $500,000 in accumulated assets. You got some of the basics of insurance in place with health and life. But I have to tell you, I see some real opportunities, right? Some of those opportunities, I think you're terribly underinsured in multiple areas. And I believe you don't really have an appropriate cash reserve given your financial situation. I think if you faced a little adversity, you would have somewhere in the vicinity of 45 to 60 days to solve it, at which point you'd be cashing out your investments or taking on more debt. That's a concern. I think you don't have enough life insurance given the amount of debt that you have. I think you've got some real opportunities with disability insurance to make sure if something happened to you, the money keeps coming in. But I also think from an investment perspective, I don't see anything tax-free there. Everything you have is taxable. And you make enough money, right? You're bringing in almost 15 grand a month. You're spending 5. So I think some money may be getting away from you. So I see some real opportunities here. The second part of the equation was, should the advisor be me? I think we'd get along really well. You clearly have a good handle on savings. You're getting ahead of it. I think you'd be optimal for me. I wouldn't have to explain a lot to you. I could just, my role would be to help you make consistently good decisions and make sure the things that you're implementing are in alignment with your strategies and that those strategies are working towards your long-term goals. I would love to invite you to become a client. See how I connect at the end? I connect what they tell me to the opportunity and the goal of whether or not they should have an advisor and should be. And when I say I want to invite you to become a client, the inherent connotation is that I don't invite everybody. Is that helpful? That's a lot in 45 minutes. I understand that. I gave you the short version, and I get that response a lot. That's a ton.
Hey, Tom, it's John. Yeah, so first of all, thank you. You're right. You covered a lot of ground there. I'll just, before we close here, and I'm sorry, we're going to probably need to scoot. I'm going to suggest a couple of things. One is, for any of you that are on the call, if you have specific questions, why don't you shoot an email to Tom, and he'll be happy to respond to you in that way, or you can set up a time to talk to him. He's very accessible. And I think he'll be more than happy to try to help you make, his process yours. A couple of things though that I heard here. First of all, the whole concept of active listening. It's such a huge thing. I mean, we're all torn with, this constant barrage of technology, and we're multitasking all the time. So, the concept of active listening is something that is really hard for us to get ourselves into sometimes, because we're just distracted in 18 different ways at all times, it seems like, these days. But again, the consistent process, the very best people I've ever known in this business had a consistent process. And obviously, once you get in with clients, you end up customizing, the results. But if you stay on a very consistent track, then I think Tom made a good point. It's a lot easier to then be listening rather than wondering what your next step is going to be, because you know what it is. It's ingrained in your practice and in your activities. And then the last thing, the way you end it by inviting people to work with you, that is such a huge issue. And it's important, I think, also sometimes to make sure that you are inviting people that you want to do business with. I think a lot of times just the struggle to find new clients leads us to do business with people that really aren't very good fits sometimes. And that almost always costs you in some way. It puts a lot of stress on your staff, on yourself. Anytime you have to kind of get out of the sweet spot of your business, you really need to be asking yourself, does this really make sense? And so the whole process, I think, and then tying it into, the invitation to come work with you is a pretty powerful way to kind of close on that meeting. So anyway, with that, folks, we're gonna cut this off. Our next call is on August 24th. That's a Friday. It'll be at 10 o'clock on that Friday, we will be sending out reminders and notices. We'll follow up with Tom and get the slides to you as always, and make sure that everybody has access to the information. And thanks so much. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I hope you're all enjoying the summer, and we'll look forward to talking again here in a few weeks. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tom. Bye-bye.